The difference between mediocrity and greatness is just greatness is mediocrity minus all of the unnecessary, all the superfluous, all the extraneous. And you think about, like, just using the example of the phone, how 50 years ago the phone was very, very different. It was much bigger, right? And it was like bolted to a wall, rotary, and actually wired, had cables. And then over time, it gets refined, it gets slimmed down and slimmed down and improved until the point that we have now this, where it's like, okay, what's the next iteration of this? Oh, it's going to be, a chip in your hand and your eye. It's not even a thing that exists, right? And so it's like the improvement is in the constant reduction of the now unnecessary. And everything kind of like follows a similar trajectory. You think about cars; they were really big because we didn't have the ability to fabricate the metal to these different shapes, or the electronics couldn't fit into such a small spot. But then as we improve, that gets smaller and smaller, and the package gets sleeker and sleeker. And that's why like modernism is kind of like, or postmodernism is equated with this kind of sterile feeling. There's less embellishments in our architecture and our statues and whatnot, and it's a little bit more clean lines and sleek structures. But I think it's an interesting analogy. I don't know how, like, if it's universal, if it's everywhere, but I do think that there's a lot to be said that the difference, and we talk about this in writing, right? Like the difference between your first draft and your last draft is the final draft is your first draft minus 10%. So you brain dump, you put out 100,000 words, and then your final draft, you now got to go cut like 10,000, 15, 20,000 of those words. And now your final draft is sleeker. It has all the fluff cut out of it. And I think about when I started tennis, it's the same way. Like when you start a new sport, you have all of these extraneous movements. That's the thing when you watch a beginner do any activity. They just look so floppy and flailing. And because the flailing is the unnecessary movement. And the mastery is like the refinement and the reduction of unnecessary of the unnecessary. So Michael Jordan, he gets the ball. There's a conservation of energy and movement. There's no wasted time. There's no wasted fluff that's not necessary for the ball going in the hoop. But the gap between him doing that at his level of mastery and me doing that, like you look at it like, God damn, Anthony, like there's so much extraneous movement and wrong movement. And so I think in a very real way, it's a helpful framework to think about anything in life, which is, okay, if I want to get better at this, what do I need to remove? Right? It's just a good frame for, I want to be better in life. What do I need to remove? What are the things that are holding me back? And it makes me think, my favorite quote is Michelangelo when he's asked, like, how did you carve Michelangelo? No, not Michelangelo, the statue of David. Michelangelo said, it's easy. I just remove everything that's not David. And it's like, okay, so the greatest version of myself, there's a greatest version of myself which requires the reduction of everything up to that point. Most people never need to worry about overcutting or removing too much, right? Because there's a moment when suddenly you had David and then you went a little too far and you took a little bit too much and now he's not that. And you kept going and now he's just a lump, right? There's a point where you can over reduce. I don't think most people ever get there. Like 99% of people are never going to get to the point where they took away too much. Because I think you have to take away enough to get to David first. And then you keep going. And maybe they do, but maybe they do it in a way where they didn't ever have David. They just chopped off a lump of marble that he would have been, and then there is nothing. But like what I'm talking about is like getting to that greatness and then going too far. Like that never seems to happen.
Because it reminds me of this other thing that you mentioned before, which is that like when it comes to like belief systems, it's not that that person that's greater than you has a belief that you don't have. It's actually the other way around. They don't have a belief that you have, right? Like a limiting belief.
Yeah.
Which is also like a form of reduction in a way.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. I mean, we talked about this in other videos as well, where a lot of people think, okay, I'm not where I want to be in life, and so I need to do more. I need to add things in. I need to add better habits. I need to do this, that, the other thing. There is truth to that. That's like the accelerator pushing down on the gas in the car. But most people, the bigger thing that's limiting to growth is that they have their foot on the brake. Yeah. They have the emergency brake engaged. And so instead of trying to focus on adding more things, you'd be better served on and reducing the things that are holding you back. And then you would by proxy move faster towards the goal. And successful people that I've noticed, it's just they don't have the same limits, the same limiting beliefs. They don't have the same limiting habits and routines, the vices that would hold them back that the average person does. And so it's not necessarily that they have something others don't. It's that they don't have something that most people do. Right? Most people have like this default to comfort and complacency and watching TV at night. And it's like, Elon probably doesn't, right? He plays video games, right? But like for a different purpose. Yeah. And so, yeah, I think beliefs, values, skills, habits, routines, all of that stuff is like, we're best served by removing that which is extraneous. Yeah. Remove that which is not necessary to get to David. Yeah. Don't worry first about getting to David. Like, cause that's the hard part, right? Like, it's really hard to like, just have this vision of David in our mind and then just like create it. All right. Like it just can't, it happens in phases, and it happens in the slow polishing. And like, what is polishing if not the removal, right? At a granular level. And so like the refinement of what we chop away from the block, at first you're using, the big chisel and you're hacking off and you're just trying to get a human shape. And then you get in there and you're like shaving away, trying to get like the contours of an arm. And then you get into the contours of the veins, right? And then you come in and you have your sandpaper, and then you're just polishing, right? What is polishing if not the microscopic reduction of the unnecessary, okay. Right? And so like, I just love that mental model that you are polishing yourself down. Your greatest version is you now minus all the extraneous. How are we? And sometimes you need to be taking a hacksaw to it. Like, oh, I really need to cut off these toxic relationships. Oh, I really need to stop eating unhealthy, and I need to get that figured out. And oh, I need to start making money. But then as you start to do that, it's like, it's more and more granular. Now we got to get out the sandpaper. Like, oh, I'm in pretty good health, but it could be better. Now what do I need to do? Right? Oh, I need to dial in my nutrition, and this little tweak will make a big difference. Or, oh, I'm making good money, but now I need to make this slight tweak over here. So it's like, where are you at in which area of your life? Are you using the hacksaw? Or are you using the sandpaper? Trying to reduce back down to who that greatest version of yourself is. And I think it's helpful to have that in your mind, because I'm sure Michelangelo had David in his mind when he started, but it's a slow, laborious process of removing the extraneous. I think that's greatness in a nutshell. Greatness is just mediocrity minus the unnecessary.
That's a bar.
Yeah, might be. I might be wrong. I'm kind of thinking out loud and just kind of talking through this in real time, but I don't know if this will make for an interesting podcast. The listeners will have to let us know. They're like, this is the ramblings of a madman. But, sometimes this is how we come to an understanding about a thing. It was like, we talk about it, we think about it, we put words out into the ether, and then we try to take those words and put them into an order and try to structure. And sometimes you go, no, that was actually stupid. That doesn't make sense. So this is us doing that in real time with a concept. The only way for me to take this and continue to polish it down would be to sit down and write it, right? Yeah. To actually take this idea and create, because right now, this is no different than, I imagine Michelangelo sitting and daydreaming about David. But it's not until he actually took the pen and like put it on a piece of paper and drew out the shape and started like doodling it and started working with it. Right now, this is just ideas, thoughts into the ether. It has no form. So for me, the next step of sculpting this idea down and trying to understand it at a better level would be to take that idea, put it to the page, to write it, make it physical, so I can see its shape, I can see its form, and then I can start hacking this idea, I can start polishing this idea. Yeah. And then next time, maybe in the future, after I've thought about this more deeply and written about it and polished the idea, I come back in 6 months and share this idea with you guys, the listeners. This is a very different type of podcast. and then it'll be very, very different,
Yeah.
right? And you'll be like, oh, this was mediocre right now, but now in the future it'll be it'll be great because we'll have removed all the extraneous fluff here. We'll have gotten to the core of the topic. But yeah, this is an experimental episode.